Why does it feel that every time that somebody wants to talk about scaling with Todd McFarlane, he's always basically like scale D's. Like, I don't care about scaling. I don't care if my, Batgirl looks giant next to my Batman. It's just not something that I really care about. And collectors are always, clamoring and crying because they want something that scales even within his own line. Like, not scale with other lines, like not with Marvel Legends or anything, just within your own line. McFarlane has always had a big giant issue with being able to do that. However, in today's video, I'm actually going to be talking about his scaling with other lines. I'm not sure how they're going to scale within the newly announced TMNT line from McFarlane. This is something that was teased and talked about for a decent amount of time. It was something that we speculated on. There were people out there that were claiming that McFarlane was going to lose the DC Multiverse line. And I think that that had to happen for him to acquire other things. And, I think those announcements will come down the line. But the TMNT line was huge, right? They just recently announced that they were partnering up with Paramount and that they were going to be able to release some Ninja Turtle merchandise. Now, I'm not sure if this is the only line that we're going to get from McFarlane. I doubt it. I could easily see them doing a 4-inch page punchers line for the TMNT universe. It just makes sense since they're already picking up the quote unquote 5-inch scale TMNT line. Now, what's interesting is, and I was watching the newest Robo Don't Know video. He does like this little weekly where he keeps us up to date with all of the biggest action figure news. I highly recommend watching Robo Don't Know. And by the way, Robo do know, okay? Robo does know a lot of stuff. He's a great customizer. He knows a lot about action figures. But the most important thing, he kind of talked about something that a lot of us had been speculating about because none of us were there at Toy Fair, like at least not, us normies, nobodies. What's interesting is that he did make a reference that he was there and he saw the TMNT figures and that the TMNT, the actual Ninja Turtles were going to be the 5-inch at that 5-inch mark. However, he also mentioned that the representatives there, the people that were at the showcase, actually mentioned that the humans were going to be 6-inch and then Rocksteady and Bebop would be a little bit bigger than the humans. That just, in my mind, it resonates as a 1/12 collectible line, which I don't know how to feel about it. My first initial impression, and by the way, this is just a raw video. There's not a crazy amount of editing. I just wanted to give you guys my personal 2 cents on this. My raw perspective on this is buffoonery. I just don't understand what's going on here. We followed you into the deep end with the 7-inch line with the DC Multiverse line. Even though some of us, and I don't consider myself one of those because I didn't have like a huge Mattel line DC Multiverse collection, but there were a lot of people that had been collecting the DC Multiverse line from Mattel for years. They had potentially dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of figures from them, and they followed you into the deep end, whether that meant selling off their Mattel action figures or having 2 separate DC Multiverse displays. They did that just because they followed you. They trusted you with the line, and they said, let's go. We're ready to follow you into a new universe. Because that's a scale, right? The 7-inch scale, the 1/10 scale, whatever it is that you want to call it. He does it with the DC Multiverse. He does it with the Collector's Edition line, some DC Direct action figures, and he even does it with his Spawn universe, Mortal Kombat, the video games that he's picked up, whether that's 40K, Witcher. He has had a ton of different action figure lines or a ton of different universes at that 1/10 scale. And now you're telling me that you're betraying all of those people, that you're turning your back on them, instead of continuing to do that, instead of giving the consumer base exactly what it is that they expect from you. Now you're trying to be unpredictable. You're trying to throw kind of a curveball at your own community and saying, I'm not going to follow that 1/10 scale, the one that you've been collecting now for years. And I know you're not going to, like display your DC Multiverse with like these video game, lines, but there's at least a semblance of consistency there, right? Like if you have your DC Multiverse display, but you're just like a McFarlane fan in general, and you want to throw up some Spawn figures next to them, or maybe some Witcher action figures in the corner somewhere, because of that same scale, because you're following that same logic from McFarlane. And now he decides to do a 1/12 scale TMNT line. That to me is absolutely brutal. It's a dirty move from McFarlane. It just feels like he's trying to prove something, or he's trying to do something just for the sake of proving it, right? Like it's just it's not necessarily, maybe it is. I mean, look, I'm not an insider. Maybe maybe Paramount came to McFarlane and said, you know what, we already have a ton of manufacturers doing 1/10 scale NECA action figure, or 1/10 scale TMNT action figures, whether it's NECA, whether it's Super 7. We have a number of other lines that are doing it, like Mattel are doing a slightly smaller than the 1/12 scale. So maybe you can do something that's truer 1/12 scale or closer to what the original IDW comic books were. I mean, that genuinely could have been a conversation that they had, but we don't know that. Like, we don't know with full certainty that that's the case. So we're just going off of assumptions here. And my assumption is that McFarlane is just kind of throwing the middle finger around at collectors, saying, I don't care about your scaling. I don't care about your collections. I don't care about your displays. That's completely irrelevant to me. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want, whenever it is that I want. And I know that I've been feeding you the 1/10 scale, but now we're going to switch it up. And I know that he has some other sublines. All other manufacturers have tiny little sublines here and there sometimes. Even like Hasbro has the like semi-articulated Hasbro like Marvel figures, which are like essentially Marvel Legends, strip, like 20 to 30% of like paint applications and like 70% of articulation. And they scale a little bit smaller usually. And yeah, they do have action figures that are specifically for, smaller collectors, people that are not adults, adult collectors. Same thing with McFarlane. He does have the page punchers. He does have, he's been doing like the animated re-releases. But for the most part, like 80% of people that follow McFarlane collect his 7-inch scale. And so I don't know. This just doesn't sit right with me. Now, in all brutal honesty, I might pick this up just because it's IDW. It seems very accurate, and the way that Robo was talking about it in one of his or his most recent video, he made a mention of saying, "Hey, like the action figures actually look better than the digital renders. They look dirtier. They look scuffed up. They look like there's a lot of intricate sculpt work." And some great paint applications all around. And so that makes me believe that he's actually pouring some real effort, like some real resources into making these action figures phenomenal. They will also come with a comic book. And I know he's been doing something different with his page punchers, where it's not just like the entire wave has the same comic book. Now he can do like a whole series. So like maybe he does a small little mini series from back in the day of like TMNT 1 through 4. And then, every single one of them has a different comic book. He also referenced something that was really intricate to me, or really interesting, was that they're actually going to do like unique body molds for each individual turtle. That's crazy. I mean, there aren't a lot of OMs out there doing something like this. From time to time, they'll do it, whether it's NECA, whether it's Super 7, but we do see them reuse the body molds across all 4 Ninja Turtles. And so I will say it's not all bad. It's not the end of the world. The figure in the digital render, and according to what Robo, I'm putting both of those together and saying, okay, these figures are going to be really well done. We know, and there's the potential that the comic book cover or the comic book covers for these page punchers could potentially be unique to this line. Like maybe McFarlane hires an artist just to do covers for this particular, little wave of TMNT action figures. We also don't know how deep he's going to jump into this. This could be like just a self-encapsulated little wave. I hope not, but this could be something that he just goes into, maybe does a few figures and then just leaves alone. I will say, and this is purely as an action figure collector. I'm not going to speak as, a loyalist or anything like that. I love McFarlane's articulation scheme from time to time. And so NECA doesn't do it for me. Super 7 doesn't do it. You're essentially just articulating their arms and putting different accessories into their hands. That's it. Those figures are not getting into any dynamic poses. I can criticize as much as I want, or I can, put them up on a pedestal as much as I want. That's the bare truth. Their articulation scheme is just, horrendous. And so the idea that McFarlane is going to pick these figures up and actually make them pretty articulated from what I can tell in the digital render, that actually makes me excited for the future. They're also basing them on the IDW, which I think the turtles are a little bit sleeker. They're a little bit smaller, so their limbs are going to be able to articulate much better. They're not big, hunky, tanks. They're not like really thick. They don't have really thick limbs and things of that nature. So I think the articulation scheme is going to be much better from McFarlane. That gets me really excited for the future. I'm not saying that McFarlane is going to that is going to be better than NECA and Super 7, because those price points are, considerably bigger than McFarlane's. And so, taking that into consideration, they're probably going to have like better articulation and probably better sculpt work and paint apps and things of that nature. But I don't think it's going to be that much better. And you add to the mix, to the formula, that McFarlane's articulation is like leagues ahead of them. This really gets me excited. The only issue that I have here is the scale. That's what's really throwing me off. And, I just kind of wanted to make a video where I ranted about that, where it felt like he was betraying his fan base, because this entire time he's been all about his fans. He's been all about his cult following, about how he's always trying to give the fans the best that he can possibly give them, the most plastic, the best sculpt work, the best paint apps. He's just going to give them, as he said before, kick-ass action figures. Scaling is not important as long as it's my scaling. But now he's switching it up by saying, we're going to do a 112 scale TMNT line, when he could have done that with the DC Multiverse. And again, I'm not even somebody that, like, I'm not somebody that needs all of my action figure lines to be 112. I've accepted that the DC Multiverse and the collector's edition line was 1/10. I'm okay with it. But if there was the option to do the 112 scale, why didn't he do it? And now he's doing it for the TMNT line. It just feels kind of like a dirty move across the board. I'm not sure if this has more to do with like a contractual obligation. Like maybe he had no choice because Paramount is forcing his hand to do something like this, but I just don't understand the reasoning there. If now you're breaking your own rules by saying I'm going to go closer or veer closer to a 112 scale, but back in the day I didn't because I just wanted to stick it to people that wanted scaling. I think that's what it feels like anyways. Like Todd McFarlane is just going to do what he wants. He's going to like do some of these, or he's going to base some of his decisions just to try to be unique, or just to try to put a spin on the action figure community, which I think makes absolutely no sense. Just give the consumers what they want. If they wanted a 112 scale DC Multiverse, why didn't you do that? And yet you're doing it for the TMNT line, unless McFarlane is just trying to like throw a slight at TMNT collectors at the moment, right? By saying, I know most of your collections from, whether it's NECA or Super 7, which are the two big heavy hitters. I know those are 1/10 scale, those are 7-inch scale. I'm not going to do that. Just to give you something to complain about, just to give you something to rip your chest hairs out over. I feel like that's probably closer to what's happening here. But overall, like I said, I'm just ranting. I'm probably going to pick these figures up. They look phenomenal, but I just think it's dirty that he decided to do the 112 scale now. And by the way, a huge shout out to Robo, because a lot of the times we have like all of these big questions and like no content creator was addressing this. And Robo went straight at it. He said, "You know what? Not only do the originals look better than the digital renders, but also they're actually going to scale within the line. So it's not going to be like everybody's 5-inch, or that they were going to go for a smaller scale. Like he actually referenced that the Ninja Turtles are a smaller size, but they're still 1/12, and then the actual humans are going to be closer to 6-inch, and then Rocksteady and Bebop, or whatever characters come after, are going to be a little bit bigger." So he kind of answered a lot of questions that I think nobody was doing. People that were there at New York, they just really didn't do a very good job of covering or addressing some of the bigger issues. Maybe some people did ask about stuff and they didn't get a straightforward answer, but Robo was all about straightforward content, and that's exactly what he did. I absolutely love it. Like I said, if you guys want to check out Robo's video, I highly suggest. He's one of my favorite content creators. I don't always agree with him, but I just absolutely love his content. I could watch it all day, especially the play dates that he does. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. As I said, this is kind of just a raw rant about this entire situation. I absolutely love McFarlane and what he does most of the time. There are times when I call him out because I feel like he's doing absolute nonsense. But at the end of the day, I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Are you guys okay with this 112 TMNT line? Would you guys like to see it in 1/10 scale? Why is McFarlane doing this? I'm very curious to see what your guys' thoughts are. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned. We do this pretty consistently. We do it to like, I don't know, 5 times, 4 times, maybe 3 times on a weekly basis, depending on how busy I am. So stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. If you're not enjoying your hobby, you're not doing it right. Pose your action figures, play around with them. And in that same breath, if you guys want to check out our latest video, the one before this, where we actually went to Disneyland and posed Black Series Star Wars action figures, if you guys want to go ahead and do that, do it. It was kind of like something random that I put together for you guys. And yeah, if you guys want to just check it out, I put, some little clips of what Disneyland's Galaxy's Edge looks like. If in case you guys are interested, go ahead and check it out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.